My name is Noelle. I'm 15 years old, and what I'm about to share will sound impossible. But I promise you it happened. It happened to me. I died, and when I came back, I wasn't the same. None of this was a dream. It wasn't a hallucination. It was real, more real than anything I've ever seen or touched on this earth. And in that place, in the presence of Jesus, I was shown something I never expected, a revelation about the future, about our world, and about a man I had only vaguely heard of before, Elon Musk. It all began on a normal school morning. I was in science class, sitting at my desk, when everything went black. I don't remember collapsing. I don't remember falling. All I remember is a strange, loud ringing in my ears, then silence, and then suddenly, I wasn't in the classroom anymore. I was above it. I could see my body, slumped in the chair, my teacher rushing toward me, other students gasping. But I felt no fear, no pain, just separation, like I had stepped outside of everything familiar. Then everything changed. A light, unlike anything earthly, appeared. It wasn't harsh or artificial. It was warm, alive, and it drew me in without words. I moved without walking, drawn toward a realm beyond this one. The next thing I knew, I stood in a place of unbelievable beauty. Peace surrounded me, pulsing through the very air. Colors I can't describe moved and shimmered around me, and I somehow knew I wasn't alone. He stood before me. Jesus. I can barely speak his name without trembling. He was unlike any painting or story I'd ever seen or heard. His eyes held the galaxies in them. When he looked at me, he saw through everything. Not in a way that made me feel ashamed, but in a way that made me feel completely known, fully seen, fully loved. He didn't speak with his mouth, but I heard him in my soul. "Noelle," he said, "I have something to show you. It's not for you alone. You must return and tell them." "Tell who? Tell what?" Without explanation, he reached out his hand, not to touch me but to reveal. Suddenly, it was like a veil was torn in front of my eyes. I was still in the realm of light, but now I was seeing something else, as if two worlds overlapped. A large screen appeared. No, not a screen, but a kind of vision, a living window into another part of time. I saw cities, crowds, people walking around with blank expressions, faces lit by glowing devices. I saw children staring into screens, families disconnected, parents distracted. I saw machines building machines, factories without workers, and skies filled with satellites. And then I saw him. I didn't know who he was at first. A man standing alone in a white room. His face was calm, but his eyes carried weight. He was surrounded by monitors, charts, models of rockets and circuits. Something in me knew this was Elon Musk. "Why are you showing me him?" I asked. "What does he have to do with anything?" Jesus answered, "Because many follow him, and many will follow what he builds. But they do not ask where it leads." The vision shifted again. I saw technology advance beyond anything I'd imagined. Microchips implanted in people's heads. Artificial intelligence that spoke like humans, predicted emotions, replaced decisions. I saw rockets carrying people away from Earth, seeking life elsewhere, as if fleeing something or someone. Then I saw worship Not of God, but of science, of human intellect, of the future man creates. They do not know what they trade, Jesus said. They call it progress, but they abandon my voice for the voice of machines. I began to cry. It was too much. The beauty of heaven contrasted so sharply with the sterile, glowing, lifeless world I was seeing. Jesus turned to me, and I'll never forget what he said. The mind was meant to serve the heart, but now the heart is being silenced. You must speak. But I'm just a girl, I whispered. No one will listen to me. He looked at me, and I could feel his love wrap around me like a mantle. They will listen, because your voice will carry my breath. Go. Tell them that without me, even the brightest future becomes the darkest. I opened my eyes back on earth, gasping for air in a hospital bed. My mother was screaming. Doctors were rushing in. I had been dead, flatlined for several minutes. But I had returned, and with me I carried a message. I don't know how to explain what I saw when I crossed over. There are no words in this world that can fully describe the clarity, the stillness, the absolute presence I felt. My body lay still on a stretcher in my penthouse, machines beeping in frantic desperation, and yet I, Jonathan Vale, was somewhere else entirely, suspended above it all. My soul hovered like mist above the scene of my own death, and I wasn't afraid. I wasn't even surprised. It was like I had always known this moment would come. And then came the light. It wasn't just light like sunlight or chandelier light. It was alive. It pulsed with intention, with love, with a gravity that pulled me toward it like a lost child hearing their mother's voice for the first time in years. And standing in the center of that light was someone I knew but didn't expect. Jesus. He didn't look like the stained glass windows or the Renaissance paintings. No, he looked more real than real. His eyes were like oceans, so full of understanding, and yet they pierced me, not with judgment, but with truth. He didn't say hello. He didn't say welcome. His first words were simply, Jonathan, we need to talk about your soul. I was naked in every possible sense, not physically, but spiritually. Everything I'd ever hidden, every deal made in greed, every person I stepped on to climb higher, every time I ignored my children to close another acquisition, was suddenly playing out around me, not as memories, but as living moments. I saw the time my daughter, Lucy, stood in her pink dress with her report card in hand, waiting to show me. I never looked up. I was on a call with an oil exec from Dubai. I saw my ex-wife crying alone in our kitchen as she signed divorce papers I never even read. I was already moving into a new condo with someone younger, someone who made me feel powerful again. And still Jesus said nothing. He simply let it unfold. Then he spoke. You were not created for money, Jonathan. You were created for love. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say, but I gave to charities. I funded hospitals. But he shook his head gently. You gave to be admired. You gave to protect your name. But you never gave to love. You built empires, Jonathan, but you destroyed the temples of your own heart. And then he showed me something else, something that still haunts me to this day. A hallway filled with doors, each labeled with a name. Lucy, Abigail, Peter, names of people I had hurt, directly or indirectly, in my ruthless pursuit of more. Behind each door was a scene, moments where my coldness, my absence, or my arrogance wounded them in ways I never understood. It wasn't the big scandals. It was the little betrayals, the ignored birthdays, the pressure I put on others to meet impossible standards, the way I dismissed employees like tools, the pride, the isolation, the worship of self. But then came the moment that changed me. Jesus reached out his hand and said, "It's not too late." I sobbed. In the spirit, I felt my very soul weeping, not out of fear, but because I had been seen and still. He offered me another chance. And he spoke again. "You still have time, Jonathan. I'm sending you back, not as a billionaire, but as a man who knows what truly matters." In the next moment, I felt myself plummeting, returning, racing through layers of light and memory until I slammed back into my body with a gasp. I sat up on that stretcher like a man resurrected, and for a moment, I didn't know if I was in heaven or hell. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to the life I had lived. I watched Jesus turn, and the warmth in his eyes shifted, not colder, but more piercing. He reached out his hand again, and in an instant, the luminous realm around us faded. A new scene unfolded, a vivid, almost cinematic timeline of my earthly life, but not as I remembered it. This wasn't a highlight reel. It was a soul inventory. First came my youth, before the money. A young boy playing stickball in a broken alley in Queens. I saw my mother packing my lunch, even when we barely had food. I saw the innocence in my eyes, pure, content, and simple. Then, like a surge, the timeline accelerated. I saw my first million, then the penthouse, then the black tie galas. I watched my wardrobe grow, but my soul dim. With each gain in my portfolio, I seemed to shrink inside. The boy from Queens began disappearing under Armani suits and icy boardroom glares. Jesus said nothing. He didn't need to. Each scene cut me deeper than the last. I saw my wife, Evelyn, her eyes lit with love at our wedding, then dulled across the years. I saw the night I skipped our anniversary dinner because a hedge fund acquisition demanded my attention. I watched her sit alone at the table with candles burning, hope fading. She told me back then, "Jonathan, sometimes I feel like your money is your mistress." I brushed it off. But here, with Jesus by my side, I could see she was right. Money wasn't just a tool. It had become my God. Then came my children, Rachel and Mason. I watched Mason's baseball games play out in silence as I remained absent, chasing deals in Zurich and Shanghai. I saw Rachel's dance recitals, the ones I said I'd make next time. There was always a next time, until there wasn't. I hadn't seen them in over a year before the heart attack. And yet now, watching these moments from the outside, I could feel their silent questions. Why isn't Daddy here? Each memory left an imprint on me, not like a film, but like a wound reopened. At one point, I saw a young intern, Carlos, crying in a bathroom stall after I'd humiliated him in a boardroom for stuttering. I didn't even remember doing it, but I saw now how that moment shattered his confidence. I saw the dozens I'd stepped on to climb higher, as if I were God over their livelihoods. I had become Pharaoh, building my empire on the backs of others. And then the courtroom, not a literal one, but a spiritual judgment seat. There was no jury, just Jesus standing silently beside me. Before me hovered every justification I'd ever offered in my own mind. I earned this. I give to charity. I'm not hurting anyone. But now those excuses hung hollow like empty shells without breath. The truth was undeniable. I had worshipped gold. I had sacrificed the eternal on the altar of the temporary. And yet, in this reckoning, I wasn't condemned. Jesus didn't raise his voice. His silence said more than thunder. It told me that I was seeing what I had chosen, not what he had destined. He whispered gently, "This is not your punishment, Jonathan. This is your invitation to return." Suddenly, we stood at a precipice. Below us was a chasm, black, endless. I knew instinctively it represented where I had been headed, not because I was rich, but because I was blind, because I refused to see that my heart had rotted beneath luxury. And then Jesus did something I didn't expect. He showed me one last vision, what could still be. I saw myself kneeling in front of my children, tears streaming down my face. I saw Evelyn's face melt from shock to embrace. I saw myself walking through the front door of a soup kitchen, not to donate, but to serve. I saw boardrooms turned into prayer rooms. I saw people who had once feared my power now drawn to my humility, and I wept. Tears in the spiritual realm are different. They don't fall from ducks. They fall from the soul. Jesus looked into me, not at me, and said, "You've been rich in the world's eyes, Jonathan. But now I want you to be rich in love, mercy, and truth. Are you willing to leave behind your kingdom for mine?" Without hesitation, I answered, "Yes." The moment I said it, everything shifted. The light around us grew blinding. My spirit, once weightless, began to feel drawn downward like gravity returning. I realized I was being sent back to the broken world, back to the hospital bed, back to the life I had ruined and was now called to redeem. Before I left, Jesus touched my chest, right over my heart, and I felt something leave me. A greed I hadn't even known had anchored itself deep in me, suddenly lifted. I felt clean, empty yet full. Then, just as suddenly, the blinding light dissolved into darkness, and the machines around my body beeped again. I didn't come back the same. There are no words to explain what it feels like to look into the face of Jesus and then return to a world so sick with noise and desire. When I woke up in that hospital bed, I didn't recognize myself. Doctors were stunned I was alive after 23 minutes. But I knew I wasn't just alive. I had been reborn. Everything inside me had shifted. The craving for money, the obsession with control, the obsession with being seen as a success, it was all hollow now. It disgusted me, not because I hated success, but because I had seen what my definition of it had cost me. My daughter, Esther, I hadn't spoken to her in years. When she heard I was alive, she visited, but her eyes were distant, guarded. I could feel the walls between us, built brick by brick from birthdays missed and wounds left unacknowledged. My son, Michael, hovered at the edge of the room, polite but cold. My ex-wife didn't come. I don't blame her. I had worshipped wealth, and I had sacrificed my family at its altar. But I remembered what Jesus had shown me. Redemption was possible, but not through words alone. It required fruit. So I began. I sold the penthouse first. The media had a field day. Jonathan Vail liquidates Manhattan Fortress. The truth, I no longer wanted to live in a palace of regret. Then I liquidated stock after stock. I gave to ministries, to shelters, to hospitals, quietly without press, not because I wanted a tax break, but because I had to empty the vault that had once housed my soul. Every dollar I gave away felt like loosening another shackle from my spirit. But the hardest part wasn't giving away the money. The hardest part was facing my children. I invited them over. I cooked dinner myself. I couldn't remember the last time I'd done that. I told them everything about the heart attack, the NDE, meeting Jesus, the vision of what my greed had caused. I wept in front of them. I begged for their forgiveness, not with shame, but with sincerity. And slowly, miraculously, something softened. Esther put her hand on mine. Michael asked if I wanted to come to his next art show. Healing wasn't instant, but it had begun. I started showing up, not just with checks, but with presence. I listened. I laughed. I asked questions. I cried. For the first time in decades, I was learning to be human again. I met a woman named Clara through a local church. She worked in hospice care. She had nothing to do with finance and everything to do with heart. She reminded me that the world didn't revolve around stock tickers and quarterly gains. She reminded me that people matter. We fell in love slowly, not the firestorm kind, but the patient, healing kind. The kind that makes you feel like God is giving you back what you thought you had lost forever. Meanwhile, I began speaking, not at business seminars, but at churches, recovery centers, youth gatherings. I shared my story openly. I didn't care about sounding impressive. I just wanted people to know the pursuit of money for its own sake will starve your soul. It will kill everything that makes you alive. I wanted to warn them before it was too late, but not everyone was happy. Some of my old business partners called me ungrateful. A few accused me of mental decline. Others begged me to return, to get serious again. But I knew I couldn't go back. I had seen too much. I had been shown too much. Then something unexpected happened. A journalist, someone I had clashed with in the past, reached out and asked to do a piece on my transformation. Normally I would have said no, but this time I prayed first, and I felt the Lord whisper, "Let the world see what I can do with a surrendered heart." So I agreed. The article went viral. Headlines like "From Billionaire to Barefoot Believer" filled the web. Some mocked me. Some admired me. But I didn't care about the noise. What mattered were the emails I began receiving, thousands of them. Men, women, young adults, all writing to say that my story cracked something open inside them. That they were leaving jobs they hated, donating to causes they had ignored, reconciling with family members, repenting. And I wept with joy, because Jesus hadn't just saved me for me. He saved me for them, too. I was living what he told me in that place of light. "Jonathan, store up your treasure in heaven. Let your wealth be love. Let your empire be mercy." And I finally understood I had been rich all along. I had just been too blind to see it. It was in the quiet mornings, just before the sun rose over the skyline of his now modest apartment, that I began to understand what Jesus meant by "store up for yourself treasures in heaven." I used to wake up to glass walls overlooking Central Park, my phone buzzing with urgent messages about investments, legal settlements, and business takeovers. Now I woke to stillness, No financial advisors. No quarterly reports. Just bird song, scripture on my nightstand, and the gentle awareness that I was alive for a reason. I started journaling what I remembered from the other side, hoping to piece it together, hoping to warn others. But I quickly realized no one needed a sermon from a former billionaire. They needed proof. They needed love in action. So I made it my life's work. The private jets were sold first. I donated the proceeds to a network of missionary doctors who were treating children with rare diseases in regions no one could pronounce. I personally met them, ate rice with them on concrete floors, heard the stories of mothers who had given birth in fields, and walked 12 miles barefoot to find help. I cried with them, not out of pity, but because for the first time I was present. I was human. I sold the penthouse next, not to pad some trust fund, but to fund addiction recovery centers in neighborhoods most Wall Street brokers wouldn't dare drive through. There was a man named Marcus who used to sleep outside the building I once owned. I had passed him so many times without eye contact. This time I found him. I took him out for breakfast. I listened. Marcus now runs one of those centers. The last time we hugged, he whispered, "You saved my soul." But the truth was, he was saving mine too. My estranged daughter, Annalise, had not spoken to me in over 7 years. The divorce, the long absences, the time I refused to leave a board meeting on the day of her college graduation, all of it had shattered something deep between us. I wrote her a letter. No polished excuses, no legalese. Just a father saying, I was wrong. I see now. I miss you. Please, let me know you're okay. It took weeks, but she replied. One Sunday, she agreed to meet me in a coffee shop. She cried before I even sat down. "Dad, I don't know who you are anymore, but I think I like him," she said. I wept harder than I ever had in my life. I found purpose in the cracks of people's lives, things I used to step over, like pain, hunger, and loneliness. I gave away old luxury watches to single fathers who had nothing to pass down to their sons. I paid off hospital bills for strangers who never even learned my name. I began mentoring teenage boys in foster care, telling them stories not about profit margins or tax havens, but about failure, regret, and how Jesus met me at my lowest. One of the most powerful moments came in a church basement on a Wednesday night. I was invited to speak to a group of men recovering from prison and addiction. I told them the truth, not the curated Forbes profile version, but the real story. The one where I became a slave to my own ego. The one where I saw Jesus. The one where I saw the tears on his face, not because he was angry, but because he loved me too much to let me keep dying. After I finished, a man in the back stood up. His arms were covered in gang tattoos, and his voice shook. "You were rich and empty," he said. "I was poor and angry. But you saw Jesus, and now I think I want to too." I walked over and hugged him. No cameras, no applause, just two broken men being healed. That's what my life became, one long walk of reconciliation. With God, with others, with myself. And I learned something that Jesus had tried to show me during that 23-minute eternity. Wealth is a tool, not a purpose. And when it becomes your purpose, it slowly eats your soul. In the world's eyes, I had lost everything. In heaven's eyes, I had just begun. Returning from the hospital, the world looked the same, but I had changed in ways that words can't fully express. I wasn't just a man who had survived death. I was someone who had been unmasked before the very eyes of God. The faces of my children haunted me, not with anger, but with grief. Not because they hated me, but because they had hoped for years that I would someday see them. Not with my physical eyes, but with the kind of eyes that matter, the eyes of a soul that truly loves. For the first time in decades, I picked up the phone and called my daughter. When she answered, her voice cracked, soft with surprise. I told her everything. I wept. I begged her forgiveness. There was silence. Then she whispered something I'll never forget. I prayed for you, Dad, every day. I knew one day God would wake you up. And just like that, the walls I'd built with stock options and granite countertops began to fall. The next few months were a whirlwind of restitution. I gathered my staff and resigned from the board of my own empire. I told them why. Some mocked, some stared in disbelief, but others cried. I set up a foundation, not in my name, but in the name of the one who gave me a second chance. Every dollar I gave away felt like lifting another chain from my heart. I started small. Scholarships for underprivileged students. Emergency relief for struggling single mothers. Church missions that spread real hope, not just good branding. But soon, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the presence of God moving through it. I went back to the neighborhood I grew up in. It was rougher than I remembered. I walked the sidewalks in shoes that cost less than $100, wearing no watch, no rings, no tailored suits. I wasn't there to be seen. I was there to see. And I saw how a teenager lit up when I listened to him. I saw how a mother clutched her baby tighter when I promised to help with her rent. I saw how the world could change, one soul at a time, if only someone was willing to start by giving up the idols in their own heart. One afternoon, I stood in the old church my mother used to drag me to as a boy. It was nearly empty. I knelt down at the altar, resting my head against the old wooden rail, and I thanked Jesus, not just for saving me from death, but for saving me from myself, from the kind of slow spiritual death that creeps in when you think success is measured by how many people call you sir, instead of how many people you've served. There's something else I haven't told many people, something that still brings chills to my bones. Before I came back, Jesus looked into my eyes one last time and said, "You have seen what money can do when it replaces me. Now go, show them what love looks like when I am Lord." I carry those words with me everywhere. They guide every decision I make, every check I write, every hug I give, every story I now tell. Today, I live in a modest home with a garden in the back. My family visits often. We laugh more than we talk about business. I attend a small church where no one knew who I was before I testified. And I love that, because in the kingdom of God, it's not about your net worth, it's about your heart. It's not about your legacy, it's about your repentance. And it's not about how much you had, but how much you gave when it counted. To anyone listening or watching, I plead with you, don't wait until death to realize what truly matters. Don't let your soul rot beneath gold-plated lies. Wealth is not evil, but worshiping it is. You can't take your money with you, but you can take the love you gave. You can take the forgiveness you offered. You can take the lives you touched. That's the only treasure heaven recognizes. If you're hearing this and something is stirring in you, don't silence it. That's not guilt. That's grace knocking. Open the door, surrender your idols, and ask Jesus, what do you want me to do with what I have? He will show you, and it will change everything. If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. What's your relationship with money? Has God ever spoken to you about it? Let us know. And if you feel called, consider giving, not just money, but time, forgiveness, or love. Subscribe for more testimonies, and may the Lord guide you to store up treasure in heaven where moth and rust cannot destroy.